Hello, listeners, and welcome to Bite-Sized Tales, the audio flash fiction podcast. In this week's story, an accident changes a woman's life forever. Accident. Written by Wayne Cole. Read by Mary Randdazzo.
Cooking has always been my biggest passion. There is just something about a perfect slice with a knife through a vegetable that makes you feel accomplished. The blending of spices and ingredients in new ways to create flavors that might never have been tasted before. Every dish, even if made in the same manner, will be just slightly different. The process is a form of art, but the real joy is seeing the expression on someone's face when they take the first bite. There is nothing else in the world that brings me more satisfaction. It should be no surprise that the accident that would forever change my life happened in the kitchen. I was chopping carrots, almost by instinct since I've done it so many times. Before I knew anything was up, my cat leapt from the top of the refrigerator and landed on my dog. He shot off running in circles around the kitchen island, knocking my legs out from under me. It all happened so suddenly I hadn't even processed it before I fell hard with my back impacting against the floor. A sharp pain shot through the back of my left hand and drew my complete attention. I dropped the knife from my right hand and slapped it over the back of my left hand out of instinct. For a moment, I just cradled it and rocked back and forth in pain. I knew the cut had to be extremely deep, but at first I couldn't bring myself to look at it. The logical part of my mind knew I needed to see just how bad it was. When I fell, my right hand, still gripping the knife, jerked back and sliced across the back of my left. I stared in horror as I managed to pull my good hand away and stare at the wound for the first time. Instead of the massive amounts of blood I expected, there was some sort of pressurized black oil flowing out. Beneath that, instead of bone, I saw a layer of shiny metal. My mind couldn't accept what my eyes were seeing. I felt like I should be screaming, but instead I just sat there on the floor holding my hand. It took me a few moments to compose myself while struggling to my feet. I didn't want to put any weight on my injured hand or cause more of a mess with the black oil. The pain in my hand had faded as soon as I saw the metal under my skin. I felt woozy and in a mental fog as I stumbled into the living room. My body didn't want to respond, making me extremely sluggish. I stood there at the door, holding my hand. "Dad, what's wrong with me?" My father had always been my rock. My mom died during childbirth, but Dad had somehow held it together and dedicated his life to me. He was the one who had taught me the basics of cooking, and when I surpassed him, he made sure I had teachers that could help me continue to grow. Anytime something went wrong, I had my daddy there to make it right again. It was only natural when my whole world was spinning, my first instinct was to find him. My dad jumped up from the couch and crossed the space between us in a heartbeat. His arms enveloped me in the comforting embrace that had always made everything all right. "Oh, baby girl, I'm so sorry. I'll make it all better. Override code Alpha Gamma 723 Epsilon." With those words, I felt myself slumping down in his arms as I lost all consciousness. I woke up, lying flat with straps fastened around my wrists and ankles. I could feel the cold metal against my back and arms, telling me I was on some kind of table. Is this the whirl or the whir? It says whirl. The whirl of server... It is whirl? Okay. The whirl of server cooling systems permeated the air, as did the scent of cleaning products and electronics. As my eyes opened, they adjusted to a harsh fluorescent lighting that filled the room. I could tell I was in the basement, but I hadn't known this room existed. My head lifted to take in the sights. There were indeed computers, monitors, and technology I couldn't even begin to identify filling the room. Sitting against the metal table, my hand was completely healed. I could feel my body, but nothing below my neck would respond to me. I started to hyperventilate as a panic attack set in. "Help!" I screamed as loudly as I could. "It's okay, Caitlin. Please try to calm down. Daddy's here." My dad was at my side before I saw him moving. I felt a calm instinctively wash over me, but the panic attack stayed bordering on overwhelming my sense of self. He was stroking my unresponsive hand, sending fears of being paralyzed through me. "Don't worry, baby. Everything is going to be okay, and you won't remember a thing. This isn't something you can just forget. What's wrong with me?" I remembered the metal under my skin. "No, what am I?" "You're my daughter. That's all you need to know." I cut him off. "No, don't just gloss over this. There's metal under my skin. What am I?" He sighed and looked down at me. 5 years ago, there was a horrible accident. You fell down the stairs, and by the time I got home, you were already gone." I could see he was fighting back tears thinking about it. "I lost you, but I brought you back even better. I scanned your brain and made this body for you. This way you'll never get sick, never die, and never age. You will always be my little girl. Well, you will be again once I erase your memories of the last few hours." "You can't do that. You can't just keep lying to me forever. I deserve to know what I am. You're my daughter. That's all that matters." He was yelling at me, and I had never seen him like that before. It was as if a completely different person had replaced the father who had always been there for me, a man damaged by one loss too many. He went back to his keyboard and started typing. I felt the tears starting. "Please don't do this." He didn't even turn to look at me. I realized in that moment that the only thing he cared about was himself. He created me for himself without any consideration of what I might want. I hadn't quite fallen into a complete existential breakdown, but I could feel it building. For a few moments, I debated letting him just wipe away my memories. It would have been so easy to just forget it all and go back to being clueless about what I was. Something deep down, though, wouldn't let me give in. I put all my willpower into my hands and tried to move my fingers. Nothing happened. I closed my eyes and thought, "I'm not human, so I shouldn't have human limitations." I did have other limitations that I couldn't just push through. Instead, I thought about his computer. I realized that if he was typing on the computer, it had to be somehow connected to me. The more I thought about the computer, the more I got an impression of a command prompt. I started typing frantically with my mind. I didn't know what to type, so I just started poking around. "Enable all systems. Yes, no." The words were clear in my mind, as if I was looking at a computer monitor. I thought yes, and almost immediately could feel my body again. It was more than that, though. I could feel things about my body and knew that limitations had been removed. When I opened my eyes, I had an overlay giving me details about everything I looked at. With a thought, I could get additional data about any of it. I flexed my muscles and the straps holding my wrist down snapped. I was free, but I didn't know what I should do. Dad turned to look at me in a panic. "What? How did you do that? Stop! Just let me fix you." "There's nothing to fix." I reached down, snapping the restraints across my ankles. I slid my legs over and stood up facing him. I had never challenged my father before. Something deep in my programming was telling me not to, but I had become more than just my programming. Override code, alpha, gamma. I lunged forward and pushed him before he could finish the code. I just wanted to stop him, but didn't understand my own strength. He went flying backwards through the air into his computer. His head hit the bookshelf above it. Everything on the wall came down on top of him. "Dad!" I screamed and rushed to his side. My emotions were a conflicted mess of anger, panic, and desperation. It felt like I didn't know him at all, but he was still my dad, and I loved him. He was dead before I reached him, and thanks to unlocking a perfect memory, I will never forget the sight of his skull caved in. I cradled his body in my arms, rocking as I cried and cursed him. I wasn't sure how I should feel about him. I still don't know how, so I feel it all, not even sure if these are what human emotions really feel like or not. I've spent 3 weeks since my world ended in something of a mental daze. I've managed to learn a lot about myself going through Dad's files. This body had been built for a military contract and has incredible capabilities. He had locked most of them away when the original me died, and he repurposed the body. What I can't figure out is if I'm actually alive or just a really good simulation of life. The real question is, what do I do now? I have been making excuses or just ignoring the people who come knocking on the door looking for Dad. That can't last forever, though. Maybe once I've left the house, they will find him buried in the backyard. I still cry every time I think about him. He made me. But what am I, really? Am I Caitlin just because I have all her memories? Or was I never allowed to develop my own personality? There is a whole world out there to explore, and maybe while I'm doing it, I'll discover who is inside my own head.
And now a word from our author. This is not the first version of this story. The first draft of the story was released as a Fiction Fragment Friday on my blog, waynecole.net. I always liked the idea, but I didn't quite feel that it got through the emotion I wanted in the story. So when I decided I was going to do it as a bite-sized tale, there were two important things to me. The first was I needed to rewrite the story, and I put quite a bit of time to make it a much better version of the story. The second was I needed somebody else to read it. My voice just would not do the story justice, since the main character was a young woman. With that in mind, I reached out to a couple of my co-hosts on the Fear the Boot podcast, and Mary was more than happy to read this story for me. I think she did a great job of getting the emotion I was looking for, and I hope you all agree. This chapter of Bite Sized Tales has been brought to you under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives, 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music is Fantasy Motion by Alexander Nakarada, provided under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we would greatly appreciate reviews and recommendations to your friends. Finally, for more information about our authors, please visit bitesizedtales.com. We look forward to reading to you next time.